And good afternoon, good evening to everybody, and happy International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies. Welcome to today's event, jointly organized by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, the United Nations Environment Programme, and the World Health Organization, who have joined forces today for the event entitled We Care About the Right to Clean Air, UN's Work on Industry, Environment, and Health. The event will have two sections. We will begin with a high-level segment with representatives of the three organizations. We will then do a short quiz with prizes announced at the end. Then we move on to the second segment, a scientific technical segment with speakers also from the three organizations. At the end, we will announce the winner of the quiz, and there will be prizes. So without further ado, let me introduce the moderator of the first segment, the high-level segment, Mr. Tareq Emtairah, the Director of Decarbonization and Sustainable Energy at UNIDO. Mr. Emtairah has over 22 years' experience in developed and emerging economies. He focuses on sustainable industrial transformation, energy transformation, policy advocacy, applied research, and capacity development. Before joining UNIDO, he was a senior research fellow at the International Institute for Industrial Environmental Economics at Lund University. Mr. Emtairah was also the executive director of the Regional Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency in Egypt. Welcome, Mr. Tareq Emtairah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elaine, and thank you for this generous introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to moderate this high-level segment of our webinar today on clean air, the International Day for Clean Air and Blue Skies. And we are very pleased to organize this jointly with our sister organizations, UNEP and World Health Organization. I think probably the biggest question that concerns us, why the need for an International Day of Clean Air, and to commemorate this on an annual basis, and what does it mean for the international community, particularly for international development partners and the UN system, to be heavily involved? I mean, I think it's probably an obvious question to ask, given that we know the nature of air pollution, that is a transboundary, and we know that also is the fact that it's transboundary is also create a condition for collective accountability and collective responsibility to deal with this. And in that context, I think it's pertinent that UN agencies and the entire UN system is involved and working around this collective accountability. From that vantage point of view, I'm delighted that we have with us in this high-level segment, joined by Ms. Jaqueline Alvarez, the Director of the Latin America and the Caribbean Division within UNEP. And from the WHO, the World Health Organization, we are joined by Ms. Maria Niera, the Director of Public Health and Environmental Department within the organization. And from UNIDO, we are delighted to have with us Mr. Stefan Seekars, the Director of Circular Economy and Environmental Protection at UNIDO as well. So we have three distinguished participants, and I'm going to jump immediately without much delay into probing into some of the key issues from the perspective of strategies, the strategic perspective on the right for clean air and implementing the right for clean air. We understand that this is also fundamentally becoming part of the human rights agenda. So let me start with you, Jaqueline, if you allow me, and just to set a bit of context for this conversation, because I know that UNEP has been spearheading the global commitment toward dedicating a day for clean air. And so maybe you want to provide us briefly context on on why this day is important. What is the significance in terms of collective action and political action?
Yes. Good afternoon or good morning to all of you that are present today with us, celebrating this International Day for Clean Air and Blue Skies, which is a very tricky name, very attractive to be honest. But I will start maybe by saying that the air we breathe is not the air that is within certain boundaries or certain countries. It doesn't exclude anyone. It's the same air that goes around and around. And the pollution that it brings is implies action that needs to be global action. We need to collectively face the challenge of air pollution. This is the third year that that we are celebrating this day, this International Day, and I will maybe highlight some aspects that most probably you know and you have heard. But the air pollution really affects the vulnerable populations, and to be honest, it is not only the vulnerable populations. We are populations at risk, all of us. So it is not only because we have or might have underlying conditions, but it is because our exposure to polluted air that also makes us populations at risk. If we are talking about from the environment perspective as well, we can highlight communities that don't have access to clean energy, where women and children are mostly exposed, particularly because they tend to stay at home. They cook using wood or using maybe coal, and maybe they also use that for heating their homes. People with less resources, it brings into different diseases as well, from not only respiratory, but also others that are related because of the air that is polluted. Why are we celebrating the Day of Clean Air and Blue Skies? Because we really need to build that a critical mass in understanding that all of us need to take action and encourage countries and different stakeholders to work together to really phase out this topic. If I talk about numbers, I can also tell you that the pollution, the air pollution costs to the health systems a lot of money. 3.4% of their PBI comes from either inside or outside air pollution, and that is not good to hear. Contamination of the air is not an isolated matter, and you might have heard UNEP and others talking about a triple planetary crisis: climate, biodiversity, and pollution. Well, this is one of the topics that it is really cross-cutting to all of them. So for us, the regional, international cooperation to really strengthen the different things that are needed to deal with this type of pollution are essential. And I will stop now with this part.
Thank you, Jaqueline, for putting an overarching context around the day, but also the importance of raising awareness around this the topic of clean air and blue skies. And you mentioned the enormous costs associated with air pollution. I want to take this as a transition to Maria, to Ms. Maria Niera from the World Health Organization, to probably bring a bit of also context around the effect of air pollution on health. And we have heard some numbers. Maybe you can sort of bring the latest on our understanding of that effect.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and happy clean air to all of you. You know, we are celebrating today, but in fact, we need to breathe every minute, every second. I mean, if there is a function in our body that we cannot avoid stopping, we cannot stop doing, is breathing. So today, more than ever, when the world is discussing about access to energy, I think we need to use the health language, the health argument to mobilize, to move this agenda on access to clean fuels, to clean sources of energy, to cleaner, more sustainable industrial processes. I think you've all heard that the very strong linkages between lack of clean air and health. I think this horrible figure of 7 million premature deaths caused every year by exposure to air pollution is a dramatic one that is somehow in our shoulders permanently, and we need to start to join forces even more than what we are doing now to make sure that we will reduce the sources of this pollution. In addition to that, we need to be part of the big revolution on accelerating this transition to cleaner, sustainable, renewable sources of energy. We need to make part of those who will be transforming our cities as well, making our urban design and our urban planning much better than the one we have now. And we need to be part of this revolution on the food systems as well. If we put all of these things on the table, not only the benefits will be to reduce the greenhouse emissions, it will be as well to reduce the pollution that is literally killing all of us and killing us on a very chronic and costly way. Our hospitals are full of patients suffering chronic respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, stroke, and even now problems related to the neurological development, the cognitive development. We know how much is affected as well. So I think never than before, the humanity has been so close to a cause that is of extreme importance, not only for public health, but for the economy, for the survival of our species, and even now that everybody's talking about the pandemic, for looking at the causes of the pandemic by stopping this destruction of the ecosystems. As the health system, we have a huge responsibility, but as the UN system and family, I think we can join forces together, and we thank you very much, UNIDO, UNEP, and other colleagues for the big effort you are doing. We will be very happy to work with you and make sure that those solutions, as Jaqueline and others have been displaying, and they're very well documented now, we can start to move on it. We can decarbonize the health system. That will be a contribution. We can provide evidence for interventions that are happening at the city level where we can reduce those levels of air pollution. We can propose better ways for our commuting, our transport on a daily basis. And of course, the industrial processes, UNIDO, I'm sure that you will have plenty of solutions and ideas for moving into that as well. So happy day to all, but remember, this is something that we need to do every minute. We can't stop breathing. And if we breathe the wrong air with pollutants, think about your lungs, because today they are the ones that are very, very much affected. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Very happy to be with you. Over.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for pointing out that it is a happy day in the sense that it's a day that we need to take action on, but it also means that it's for us to also understand that are there collective actions we can take on a daily basis that could correspond and respond to the challenge of clean air. And then I will come back to this later, but I want to pick up on your point as also the numbers you mentioned, 7 million premature deaths because of air pollution. And we just had a meeting yesterday with a group of regional centers for renewable energy efficiency from all over the world coming into UNIDO. We're discussing one question's sort of what it takes for governments to understand the externalities to drive cleaner technology deployment in their countries. I mean, I think the numbers on healthcare, sort of the impact on healthcare and the cost associated with healthcare could be one key indicator that could point out at least the cost on the public treasury from bad air quality that could drive a bit of balanced response around pollution from transport or pollution from industry to what extent these numbers are very transparent to governments all over the world? Just a quick reaction from you, Maria.
That's an excellent question that I'm asking myself every morning. I mean, the evidence is there, the numbers are there, the benefits could be obtained very quickly for mayors, for governments. The political agenda at the moment is giving us as well the sense of urgency. All the governments are now on the emergency, looking at the different sources of energy. And still, this number is not yet there. Even some journalists, when we put this number off the table, they come back saying, oh, really, 7 million? This is a horrible number. Why we didn't hear it before? Well, we are saying it, everybody's saying it, we are repeating it, but for some reasons, this is a kind of invisible killer. And again, it's about the primary prevention. And you know that in medicine, we say it's better prevent than cure, but it's one of the most, the oldest sentences that we use, and everybody's in agreement. But I'm afraid we are still not investing enough on what is the primary source of all the damages we are suffering, and where the investments will make a lot of sense. I think any economy, any government, any prime minister, any mayor today, if they want to advance minimum on economy, they need to invest on clean air, on reducing pollution. Otherwise, there will not be even immediate benefits that they used to have it before by destroying the environment. Today, this is even not possible anymore. So I think we all need to join forces as well on this dissemination of the information, on insisting in this number. Our ministers of health, they heard it many times, we have resolutions, but still we need to keep it going to the ministers of energy, ministers of health, ministers of industry, mayors, governments, everyone, and keep repeating, because if we do it right, the benefits will be enormous. And if we don't address it, we are all lost.
No, thank you, Maria. And indeed, it is about raising awareness of these numbers and keep repeating them as well, as much as we interact with all ministries. You mentioned the role of industry, and this is a good transition to Stefan, my colleague, in UNIDO, Stefan Sikars, who was also my boss in the Environment and Energy Directorate. Stefan, we have talked about this many times. We always see there's a perception that industry is the culprit in terms of, it's a perception also that it is the source of the enormous problem around air pollution, although we can discuss that it's a variety of sources. But regarding that perception on industry, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what can we do in terms of industrial policy or in terms of intervention on the industry side, and what the UNIDO is doing to build capacity around industrial pollution mitigation from the work that we do. Stefan, you're with me.
Thank you so much, Tareq, for the intro and the question, and let me use the opportunity to also greet Maria and Jaqueline as my distinguished fellow panelists, and all of you who are listening and watching us here. So UNIDO is the specialized agency of the United Nations promoting industrial development. And we do that to reach poverty reduction, inclusive globalization, and environmental sustainability. Here in UNIDO, we assist member states by helping them to review, formulate, and implement industrial policies that address, among other things, energy and environmental issues linked to air pollution, and therefore to human health and the environment. Regarding industrial energy policies, we support energy efficiency, the use of renewable energies, and sustainable electric mobility. And all of these lead to a reduced energy use from fossil fuels, which in turn is leading to reduced greenhouse gas emissions and reduced black carbon and particulate matter. The therefore improved air quality helps, of course, also to mitigate climate change. Regarding environmental industrial policies, UNIDO supports our member states in the implementation of a number of multilateral environmental agreements related to the reduction or elimination of emissions of persistent organic pollutants, other toxic air pollutants like mercury, and of ozone-depleting substances. To be specific, we support the implementation of the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, Minamata Convention on Mercury, and the Montreal Protocol on Substances that Deplete the Ozone Layer, including its Kigali Amendment. We help there the governments in formulating policies, but we also work a lot with industries in order to give them the know-how and the ability to move away from pollution and move towards solution. We reduce or eliminate these emissions, and that leads obviously to improved air quality, reduced exposure to toxicants, and the recovery of the ozone layer. There are many examples related to these two pillars of our UNIDO approach to tackle air pollution, and of course also climate change, which requires strengthening our focus on resource-efficient and low-carbon industrial development and on circular economy. The approach also requires deepening our partnerships with governments, donors, the UN partners, some of which, but by far not all, you see here, industries, academia, NGOs, civil society organizations, media, and other key stakeholders sharing our common goals, for example, through events like this. I can further expand on these later on, but for the moment, I would say back to you, Tareq, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Stefan, for also highlighting the needs and approaches in which we can work with industry on contributing to cleaner air through intervention on the manufacturing side. I will come back to you because there's few other ideas around also point source versus non-point source air pollution and how much can we influence that. But I want to return to Jaqueline, if time permits. Jaqueline, are you still with us? I see the camera is off, but good time. Because I understand that the Clean Air Day was instituted as part of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. We've been in, I think this is the third cycle or fourth cycle of emphasizing that agenda in terms of an international day. Are we making progress? Where are we making progress, and where we are not making progress in terms of collective action around this topic? You're muted, Jaqueline.
The most common words lately, right? Muted and muted. Yes. Well, we are making progress. For me, the question is it fast enough, the progress that we are making? And the answer to that is, unfortunately, no. We still need to do a lot. And maybe I will also like to reflect a little on the point that Stefan and Maria were talking about, and bringing our responsibility on decision-making as well as, not only as civil servants, international civil servants, but also as people living in this world. And in reality, every day we can ask ourselves the choices we make. For example, walking instead of using a car, just trying to, in a way, use a bike whenever possible. All of those things look like very tiny things, but at the end makes a whole difference. We have been working in UNEP very strongly also with that, not only with the electric mobility aspect and transport aspect of the air pollution, but also in trying to provide path and walking roads for people to really be safe when they are going and moving around, with no need to maybe take the public transport either, but also in making the realization that they also have a choice to make when these things are happening. Of course, there are a lot of areas related to industrial development, and we heard Stefan saying some of those things. But dealing with transport is one of the biggest issues that we can all relate, and that we can tell also numbers on how those things are evolving very quickly. As you know, and you said also, the right to a clean air is a human right. And for really making it happen, we need to continue with this narrative, and we need to strengthen all the things that can happen, not putting the burden on others, but also on our decisions and how we push the decision makers, how we push industry to change. Maybe if in a nutshell, as I was mentioning, the electric mobility aspects of in particular our work in UNEP is really highly recommended to think thoroughly, as also UN. And my colleague Soraya, she will be making a whole more list of things and telling you things afterwards as well. So I will not enter into the details of what she will share with you later.
Thank you, Jaqueline, and I want to also take the opportunity to weave in also Maria on the role of the WHO, because we have also associate very much the health organization on of course public health and etc. But in terms of WHO agenda on the linkages between air pollution and air quality and health, what are your priorities in the next few years on that, Maria? Is Maria with us, or we lost her? It looks like we lost her. While, okay, maybe.
Tareq, it seems that she was in an airport, perhaps
okay.
flight, so maybe we missed her.
Maybe I can jump to Stefan. I know that we have 3 more minutes left. Segment it's just to put a context to our conversation, and I think back to Stefan and he mentioned what we can do around industry. Perhaps a question of 2 parts. One is, are we able to change the image of industry, the cliche image of industry as a culprit as a part of the solution around air pollution? And is there anything else that we can do? Because the focus has always been on point source emissions, and increasing evidence show that particularly in urban climates and in very context, that it's more and more the non-point source that are causing bigger part of the problem around air quality and air pollutions. Is there a role for the multilateral, an organization like UNIDO to influence that space, to contribute to it?
Thank you very much, Tareq, for this twofold question. Let's start with the cliche of industry, maybe. As you rightly pointed out, industry is by large parts of the general public seen essentially as a main source, and that means a culprit for pollutions and emissions. But let's not forget, it can also be in particular related to climate change, a victim to emissions. And most importantly, maybe, if you talk about solutions and what to do about pollution and how to get our skies blue again, we rely almost exclusively on industry to find solutions, technical solutions, which help us to deal with our environmental problems and to roll these solutions out, because some of those might deal with the industry itself, many of those will deal with products which help again to roll back pollution, emission, and to bring us closer towards blue skies. So I believe it's possible to reverse the cliche you mentioned, and industry has a crucial role to play. And it's only with cooperation, including cooperation in the industry, that we will be able to find and implement the solutions that we are so desperately need. I mean, one of the examples maybe, there's an organization called the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, which is led by the CEOs of more than 200 leading companies, and they published in last year a Vision 2050, and there they recognize and they acknowledge the three critical challenges that they see our world is facing, namely climate change, environmental damage, and the mounting inequality. And the mounting inequality is something we need to keep in mind strongly in order to advance with development and advance in reducing inequality and simultaneously solve environmental challenges and reduce them, solve them. So this has to go in parallel. We cannot do one on the cost of the other. And it has also, this report says, and correctly says, that the COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated that these challenges are interconnected and that our systems are ill-prepared. So I think we have lost, during the COVID-19 pandemic, a couple of years of development. A lot of people in the world have become poorer and worse off, and in critical ways worse off. And we need to see that we address pollution, we address climate change, and we address this precarious economic situation for so many people at the same time. And here we are around 60% of our technical cooperation we put in projects related to environment and energy. And of course, we do most of them with industries, and that's 60% of, that amounts to maybe not quite $1 billion, 800 odd maybe. So I think there's a lot which can be done, and we are only a medium-sized UN organization. If you ask whether we should go broader than point source emissions, heavy point source emissions, I would say, from my perspective, there's pollution caused directly by industry and solutions for that. That is an important fraction, but only a fraction of the overall pollution. And then there's pollution caused by products which are by anything which is typically generated by industry. Could be cars, could be plastic bags, could be anything which consumes energy, refrigerators, heating systems, cooking. And of course, there are many solutions we can bring, and these small emitters, which are very often connected to industrial products, have a huge aggregated potential, monstrous aggregated potential. We are dealing, for example, with the air conditioning sector, with the split air conditioners. There we talk about 150 million units per year that are being produced, and which consume each of them around a kilowatt of energy, 150 million new units every year. Of course, if you change something on them, that they consume less, this has a monstrous impact. And I believe going through both the product and here also the consumer product route to reduce all kinds of pollution, particularly air pollution, and going through the point source heavy industry route is both very relevant and can both save our world from this type of air pollution. Back to you.
Thank you, Stefan. And no, indeed, I was exactly wanted to highlight and allude to this point of products that there is on the aggregate level. When you let's take clean cooking. I mean, it's an enormous source of indoor air pollution that has contributed to the 7 million premature death that we have heard about. So putting on the market cleaner products, cleaner fuel value chain would tremendously change that dynamics. I think I noticed that I've run my limits. I think I want to stop and end it here by just again highlighting the importance of celebrating clean air and blue skies. Air pollution knows no national boundaries, as Jaqueline said. It's pervasive. It's a collective action. It's a collective problem. It's a collective problem and requires collective action. And particularly as international civil servant, as UN agencies, we can and we should play the role that we can do to raise awareness of both the enormous costs associated with, as Maria mentioned, in terms of health and public budget on health and other issues, but also create the incentives for policymakers and industry to take actions on various aspects of air pollution. With this note, I want to thank Stefan, Jaqueline, and Maria for joining us, and the three organizations for coming together to convene this webinar and celebrate the Clean Air Day. With this, and I pass it on to Ghislaine for the second segment of our conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tareq. Thank you, panelists. Now, before we move on to the second panel, let us proceed to the quiz. So let me share my screen, and can somebody give me a thumbs up when you can see the quiz? Okay. So I invite everybody to go on menti.com, as you can see on the screen, and to use the code 31144817. So that is menti.com, and the code that appears here on the screen. And we are going to show 4 questions now, and the remaining questions at the end of the second panel. And remember, there will be prizes for the winner. So make sure to reply to participate and try to now to join menti.com with the following code 31144817. We're going to give 1 minute to people. Once you're there, you will have to type your name or some sort of name that we can identify you with. And afterwards, we will get in touch with the winners, or we will ask the winners to get in touch with us, and we will send you a prize for taking part. It is not only the correct answer that we're looking for, we're also looking for speed. So make sure you take part in the 4 questions that we're going to do now, and then we will do 6 questions, the remaining questions of the quiz after the second panel, so towards the end of the seminar. Okay, let's give a few seconds more for anybody that didn't go. That is menti.com with the code that appears on the screen. Okay, I see that quite a few people have signed up, so maybe we can begin.
Belém, just a few more seconds. People are really joining. We have only 13 people. We have very good prices. So I really ask people to participate.
Okay.
Okay, 14 now. Maybe one more. Okay, they are shy. Let's start then.
Okay.
16 now. What?
Okay, that's
Very
good.
Very good. Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Okay. What is the purpose of celebrating the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies? Okay, so C was the correct answer, and I see that out of 28 people, 20 got this question correct. So let's move on to question number 2. Do UNEP, WHO, and UNIDO belong to the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and celebrate the International Day of Clean Air for Blue Skies? So time's up, and again, out of 29 people this time, the correct answer was A, and 26 people got that question correct. So well done. Moving on to question 3. Who is responsible for achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change? And the answer was the last one, everybody, and 25 people got that question correct. So let's move on to the 4th question and the last one of this part of the quiz. The remaining questions are coming up after. Transboundary air pollution originates in one country and can damage the environment in another, true or false? And everybody got that question correct. So let me stop sharing my screen now, and let's move on now then to the second segment of today's event. Let me introduce the moderator of the second panel, Ms. Heather Adir Rohani, Technical Lead on Energy and Health at the World Health Organization. Ms. Adir Rohani leads the work on energy and health at the WHO headquarters in Switzerland. She has led the establishment of the Health and Energy Platform of Action and the High-Level Coalition on Health and Energy. Ms. Adir Rohani co-led the coordination and development of the WHO guidelines for indoor air quality household fuel combustion, and is currently overseeing the work to support countries in the implementation of these guidelines. She also actively participates in and represents WHO and the UN Sustainable Energy for All Interagency Experts Group on Sustainable Development Goal Indicators and the Global Strategy for Women, Children, and Adolescent Health. It is my pleasure to give the floor now to Ms. Adir Rohani. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to have the kind opportunity to chair this kind of more technical scientific panel, and I really appreciate the nice introduction. So we've heard for some really important numbers and key priorities for really cleaning up the air around us from some of the earlier panelists, and making sure that we ensure blue skies, from some of the biggest champions from UNIDO, UNEP, and WHO. So now, during this session, we're going to really dive into a little bit more of the technical details and learn more about the roles of different sectors, some of the successful elements of action to clean up the air, connections between climate change, health, and air pollution, and what is the different UN partners are doing on the ground to really work together and work with countries and work with other stakeholders to really clean up the air we all share. One of our first panelists is Ms. Soraya Simona from UNEP's Air Quality Program. She's the head of air quality. She's the air quality coordinator at UNEP. She's been working there for over 20 years in the UN system. She's joined UNEP in 2008, and she's currently, as I mentioned, the coordinator. She provides a lot of coherent framework for the air quality work. She really works on, tries to find opportunities and works to refine UNEP's offer on air pollution, and improves the coordination and communications between UNEP internally, but also within other agencies and outside more broadly. She's been working some operational programming on air quality in 4 countries: Ethiopia, Uganda, Costa Rica, and Peru. Some key places where air quality is true challenges. So these are quite some issues she's tackling. She'll be followed by another presentation from 2 Mr. Pier Paolo Mudu, the Technical Officer for Environment and Climate and Health Center, as well as Mrs. Carolyn Sherzin. Mr. Mudu, he's a statistician and geographer working for the WHO Euro Environmental and Health Center. He also works for WHO headquarters. He coordinates, and he was the developer of the AirQ Plus software. This is the software that many people on the ground and many policymakers are using to actually calculate the impacts of air pollution on health. Mr. Muda has also done a lot of work carrying out impact assessments, environmental policy interventions. He's worked a lot in countries and actually been developing case studies for both inside and outside of Europe. For example, he's done a lot of work in Ghana with his work on the Urban Health Initiative to really clean up the air through urban health initiatives. He also coordinates the development of a QGIS plugin green UR system to assess the impacts of green spaces on health. And he's coordinated the organization, as I mentioned, for the Urban Health Initiative in Ghana and Accra, which we're hoping WHO will begin able to replicate in other countries and really have countries partner together to really learn how to clean up the air in cooperation. And Ms. Caroline Shazin, she's a consultant for air quality and health at WHO. She's an expert on air pollution exposure models and environmental health. She's working on air pollution at WHO headquarters, working and really coordinating the SDG indicator group and working on that 11.6.2, urban air quality in cities. She's developed a repository of tools and guidance documents to support air quality management. She's also worked with groups from within the Global Air Pollution and Health Technical Advisory Group. And prior to her great time at WHO, she's also worked at the Caribbean Industrial Research Institute and the Canadian Urban Environmental Health Research Consortium. So it's a pleasure to have her as well. And finally, our final presentation will be given by Mr. Ole Nielsen. He's the chief of the Montreal Protocol Division of UNIDO. Mr. Nielsen is the mechanical engineer specialized in energetics and refrigeration, a key issue as we see the need for cooling and rising. He has 30 years management and technical expertise with Montreal Protocol, a very key policy decision to really driving air quality improvements. He's joined UNIDO in 2011 as the chief of the protocol division for Montreal Protocol Division, and he's leading the organization's efforts to really implement a phase-out plans of ozone-depleting substances in multiple countries. And prior to his role, Mr. Nielsen worked as an independent consultant for the Montreal Protocol project formulation and implementation. And he has ample private sector experience in the refrigeration industry, which is really key, as I mentioned, as the demand for cooling is really growing. So with that, I would really like to turn to our first presenter, and that's Ms. Soraya. Ms. Soraya, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you as well for the nice introduction. And I would like to, of course, wish us all a very good Clean Air Day today, the third one, as was already mentioned, after the adoption of the United Nations General Assembly resolution in December 2019. So I hope that through this day and the global movement that all of us are trying to develop, we can indeed have a positive impact on the levels of air pollution globally. Just to confirm that someone will help me with the slides, that I don't have to upload it myself. Can someone confirm?
I believe that, Ms. Soraya, we were actually hoping that the individual presenters can put them on, but we can refer to see if we can put them up quickly for you if you've sent them along. I can try to look for them myself, just a second.
Okay, otherwise I can also.
Okay, let me find the slides quickly. Okay, can you confirm that I am sharing the correct presentation?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Good. Let me make it big. All right.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. So maybe this afternoon, I wanted to share with you a little bit the work that UNEP together with partners is doing on providing support to national governments as well as local governments and others in improving air quality globally, but also at regional and national and city level. And maybe that will also help answering the question that was posed earlier on during the high-level segment on, are we really making progress? And if not, what are the key challenges? So I would just start, next. I will just start by maybe going back to UNEP mandate on this issue. We actually, our mandate derives from United Nations Environment Assembly resolution during the third session of UNEA back in 2017, where member states adopted a resolution on exactly this topic and asked member states to really strengthen their commitments to specific initiatives. We mentioned earlier on the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. There are other initiatives such as the Batumi Action for Cleaner Air, which has been active in Europe. Also addressing specific issues such as PM 2.5, but black carbon as well, and methane, which is of course very, very important, as well as specific sectors. And we already heard about, the challenges in the specific sectors: transport, energy, industrial emissions, etc. A very important component of the resolution was also on sharing knowledge at regional level, and which resonates very well with the theme of this year's International Day of Clean Air, which is focusing on the air we share, recognizing the transboundary nature of air pollution. And also I'd ask UNEP to take specific action. So you have them listed here. I will come back to that in my next slide. But basically, this is what it covers. Ranging from sectoral support to country support, assessment, and then of course global approaches to the issue. Next, please. So as a response to this resolution, UNEP, together with partners, and there we work very closely as well with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition, CCAC, we decided to put together a program to respond to this very important challenge. This program is organized around 4 main components. So first of all, of course, the issue of monitoring and assessment. So how do we provide, more support to countries that don't have a good monitoring system? How do we also, of course, develop assessment? And how do we provide guidance on this, as well as synergies? How do we synergize this with other initiatives, such as, for instance, support to national planning efforts? The second one, equally important, is really how do we make sure that there is policy, legislation, and technology support? Again, and I think we heard that during the high-level session, how do we provide, the right enabling framework for government, for industry, and for other stakeholders to work on these issues? How do we put the focus on sectors, the most emitting sectors in particular? And yes, and how do we put in place air quality standards and legislation? The third one is really the one that brings us together today, right? The advocacy and awareness raising. UNEP and partners are engaged in many of these campaigns. Of course, Brief Life is the one that is quite popular, and you all know it. A joint campaign from WHO, UNEP, and CCAC. We also have, of course, now the International Day. And there was before a global platform on air quality, which was led by WHO, and which now has another name. And the fourth one is international regional cooperation. Here, the focus is very much on, again, recognizing the transboundary nature of air pollution and recognizing that action has to take place at all levels and at various scales. So really supporting this regional environmental and health fora, again with WHO, as well as regional communities of practice. Looking also at the very successes of the Europe Air Convention, known as LEARTAP, and see how can this actually be replicated in other regions, as well as supporting, for instance, ministerial forum in Latin America and the Caribbean, but also in the Africa region through AMSET, for instance. Next, please. So in 2017, in 2014, UNEP did the first report looking at where the world is in addressing air pollution. And this report was actually updated in last year, so in 2021. And this provides, a snapshot of where we are collectively. Of course, let me just state from the onset that this has been done through questionnaires, through questions to national governments. So it doesn't necessarily capture, all the other very successful practices that exist at city or local governments level or others. But we recognize that, across these different sectors, industry, transport, solid waste management, household air pollution, and agriculture, we have some of the indicators. I mean, these indicators that you see on the right side can actually help us in evaluating progress. So whether it is clean production incentive, vehicle emission standards for transport, as well as cleaner fuels and vehicles, waste burning, the critical issue of open waste burning, household energy, sustainable agriculture are some of the indicators that the international community agrees that are important to monitor progress on air pollution, on air quality. In addition to that, of course, we also have some qualitative indicators such as do we have monitoring networks? Do we have air quality management strategy at national and city level? And finally, do we have ambient air quality standards, going back to the enabling environment that we were talking about earlier on. So you see that indeed there seems to be progress, but the progress indeed is very uneven. And maybe we can move to the next slides, please. So those are some of the key findings from this report. So in addition to this report, colleagues in the law division of UNEP put together a global assessment of air pollution legislation. And actually one of the key findings was that legal instruments containing ambient air quality standard is increasing. However, only 30% of countries impose obligation to meet the standards. So there is definitely here a question of enforcement and compliance that needs to be addressed. In terms of national air quality management strategy, we see that 75% of countries do not have an air quality management strategy. So they don't have a national framework to address these issues. In terms of monitoring, we still have 70% of countries that do not have continuous monitoring at multiple sites. And of course, this is data at national level. At city level, of course, there is some data from WHO that has been released recently, which shows that there is great progress in cities. I think it's now 6,000 cities which are monitoring air pollution. So this is very promising. In terms of adoption of policies and actions, unfortunately, we are still faced with the challenges such as financing gaps and also an inability to invest in data analysis and enforcement capacity, as I mentioned earlier. Next, please. Next, thank you. So here I just wanted to give you also a snapshot of the regional reports that complemented this kind of global picture. There is a lot of text in this slide, so I'm not going to go through the text, but in details. But just to show that, of course, there are some specificities in some regions. Air pollution has many faces in different regions of the world, and hence, of course, the need to address the real sources, to understand, address, and measure the real sources of air pollution. So if you look at Africa, for instance, road transport was a major issue. It's also the one which has experienced significant improvement in the last couple of years. Energy and industrial sectors, there was minimum progress since 2016. And the issue of open burning of waste remains a very challenging issue in the region. We have the forum of environment minister taking place next week in Senegal, I believe, AMSEN, and one of the resolution and decision we hope will address this issue of open burning of waste, which remains a critical challenge in that region. Next, please. In Asia and the Pacific, there has been encouraging progress, and Asia and the Pacific is one of the kind of leading region on air pollution action. There is also the issue of regulation of open waste burning practices, which remain an important challenge. And there is a big movement towards this regional and sub-regional cooperation efforts. Whether it is from Southeast Asia or other parts of Asia, there are these regional kind of cooperation mechanisms put in place. To focus on specific issues, such as transboundary, such as we have UNEP, which is very active in the region. So this is something that is very promising in the Asia-Pacific region. Next, please. Of course, Europe is where we have the regional treaty on air pollution, I would say, the Convention on Long-Range Transboundary Air Pollution, which achieved significant progress in reducing emissions. However, we see now an increase in ammonia emissions, particularly from the agricultural sector, that is also a critical issue in that region. Next, please. So Latin America and the Caribbean is another region where there has been progress on regulation, policies, and framework. We actually have the Latin American Caribbean Forum on Air Quality, which ministerial forum, which actually adopted an action plan some years ago, and this action plan has been updated recently. I think it was last year, calling for more action, accelerated action on the solution that work. So this is also very this is quite promising. However, you can see on the screen there are still some, of course, key sectors that are problematic. So such as household energy and transport, though we see progress in adoption of vehicle emission standards and clean energy in household. Next, please. So North America is one of these regions, I would say, together with Europe, where there has been indeed significant progress in achieving long-term emission reduction, due to the fact that, of course, there has been monitoring frameworks in place, as well as legal instruments which ensure the compliance and enforcement. In the case of North America, one of the interesting features is the importance of environmental justice. And we talked about earlier on about this, again, this UNGA resolution on adopting the right to clean air. And there are some interesting practices in North America which describes how environmental justice can be taken into account and could probably be replicated in other regions. Lastly, I think that's the last slide about the regional kind of focus. This is West Asia. So West Asia, there has been, yes, general improvement in air quality regulation and in developing air quality monitoring network. In West Asia, the main kind of trend is, of course, the energy problem issue. So this is something that will need to be addressed through long-term national energy renovation strategy. And I think that should be the last slide from this regional focus. All the reports that I've mentioned can be found through these different links. And yeah, and I will be very happy to answer any questions or to contribute to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Simone. Ms. Simone, that was a wonderful presentation. It was really good to see this real regional focus. And also I like to see those green bars of progress. They're showing that there are sectors that are making and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel to making sure that we have blue skies for everyone. I'll pick up some more questions at the end after we have our presentation from the next two panelists. So now I'd like to turn the screen, I guess one would say, to Mr. Midhu and Mr. Kara and Mr. Shersing. Over to you. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Heather. Will you be sharing the presentation also for us?
I actually didn't do it on the last one, but I'm happy to do that if that'd be helpful. Just one moment. I don't know. Just a moment.
I can also share it. I've got it here on my screen, if that's easier.
Yeah, that might be easier. I have it, but yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much.
Please let me know I've got the correct version.
Yes, that's it. Happy to be here today to talk about this global challenge, which is air pollution. Next slide, please. So Soraya from our colleague from UNEP focused on how policies and regulations and what the progress has been. And in our presentation, we're going to focus on how air pollution impacts on your health. We're going to talk about that at the individual level. And then we're going to look at what has been the progress in air quality across the last decade. And lastly, we're going to give a few examples of some of the initiatives that WHO has been doing with respect to air pollution. Next slide, please. So air quality, air pollution affects almost every organ in your body. And when you think about air pollution, you don't realize that it's the second leading cause of deaths from non-communicable diseases, second only to tobacco smoking. So some of the non-communicable diseases that are caused by air pollution that have strong evidence are heart disease, stroke, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and lung cancer. Air pollution impacts not only your brain and your heart and your lungs, but it also impacts your skin and it impacts your reproductive organs. It has a significant impact across the board. Next slide, please. At the global level, we've heard Dr. Maria talking about how air pollution has led to 7 million premature deaths, 7 million deaths that could have been avoided. From ambient air pollution, which tends to come from traffic, industry, dust, amongst other sources, we have 4.2 million premature deaths could have been avoided. At the household level, we have 3.2 million deaths. And this comes mainly from over 2.4 billion people cooking with polluting fuels and technologies. When we look at the air quality, sorry, same slide, please. When we look at the air quality, how it has changed within the last decade, we see majority of the regions having gradual decreases in air pollution, and that's great, but there's still much more room for improvements. Next slide, please. In 2021, the World Health Organization released updated air quality guidelines. And these guidelines have been shown that air pollution can have a significant adverse health impact, even at much lower levels than were previously recognized. Air quality guideline for fine particulate matter, for example, is half of what it used to be. Right now, it's 5 micrograms per meter cubed. Now, these current levels, 99% of the world's population lives in areas where air pollution exceeds the WHO air quality guideline. Next slide, please. So we know how important air pollution is. We know the impact that it has on your health. What can we do? So in an effort to support countries' ability to achieve the new air quality guidelines, we've convened a working group for SDG 11.6.2, which focuses on air quality in cities. One of the outputs of this working group, which is a collaboration with multiple UN agencies, is a repository of over 100 UN tools and guidance documents to support air quality management strategies and to help countries improve their capacity for the reporting criteria for SDG 11.6.2. This repository is being launched today. The link that you see below in the slide can take you to there. In addition to that repository, we're also launching a working group report that allows users to see the context of how these 7 domains that are presented on the right side, whether it be policies, measurement methods, funding opportunities, and health impact assessments, how each of these themes connect to the overall air quality management strategy. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Pepal, and he will tell you more about some of the initiatives that we have.
Yes, I thank Soraya and Caroline for putting emphasis on the availability and need to have air quality monitoring data. And we need to have this data because we need to know the sources of air pollution, so that the air we breathe is composed by many different substances. And it is important to know where we are with what kind of substances that are entering our lungs. And moving then, I mean, this allows us to move from knowing the conditions, the local conditions, or even the national conditions where we are, to some policies and interventions. And as WHO, we have been piloting some work, for example, in the area of urban health, where we had air pollution as the main focus to understand how a city is addressing the issue of air pollutants. And it was mentioned before also the interrelation between air pollution and climate change. So we set up with the Urban Health Initiative with a large project in Ghana and in Kathmandu in Nepal, an idea of what can the health sector learn, how can the different sectors interact together in order to reduce air pollution. And this is a project that we are just finalized this year, and where we have been going through all steps that are needed in order to understand the impacts of air pollution on health, who is responsible for these impacts, the sources of air pollution, the different sources. And I think that there is interesting materials to be discussed, because this is a project where we have been going in the detail of land use and also of the different sectors, how the different sectors are affecting health. It was mentioned before in the Soraya's presentation, the issue of waste burning, the issue of transport, and all these sectors are affecting health in a very different way in very different countries. And this, unfortunately, does not allow to give universal kind of policies and suggestions, global, for every place. I mean, the only global recommendation we can give is obviously to reduce emissions, but then you need to know where these emissions come from. Next slide, please. Once you are in a place and you're working on the health impacts of air pollution, obviously you need a lot of scientific background to support you. And it was mentioned quickly, but the work of WHO relies on evidence that is agreed by in groups of international experts and scholars. But there is also a line of work that I'm presenting here very, very briefly and quickly, that is about giving instruments and tools to people to understand the different health impacts of air pollution. RQ Plus was mentioned before when Heather was introducing me, but there are also other projects. For example, one is related to the carbon reduction benefits on health, and another one on green spaces, also mentioned before, and heat. There is a software that is online available for assessing the impacts of walking and cycling. I didn't want to overcrowd this slide, but there is also another software that we have developed very recently that is called BARAP, that is the benefit of action to reduce household air pollution. And this is a planning tool for assessing the costs and benefits of different interventions that aim to reduce cooking-related household air pollution. And is part of a toolkit that is called CHEST. So our work is covering both ambient and household. It's not only producing statistics as Caroline was presenting before, but also trying to see what are the best interventions that are protecting and are fostering human health. Next slide, please. This work that we are promoting needs to have a different role for the health sector. And we have been developing a lot of different materials in the last few years to I would say, to empower the health sector and to give the health sector the capacity to sit down at the decision-making tables with a different way, in a different way compared to the past. So the capacity building work that we are doing is obviously based on evidence, is based on all the state of art for our knowledge that on the health impacts of air pollution. On guidelines, 2021, as Caroline was mentioning, we presented the new air quality guidelines. And then also the work on tracking progress in different places. That is a difficult work that also we are engaged. But the work on the capacity building is quite important because for the health sector, is not only understanding how much air pollution is affecting the health of the people, but also how to change the way to use arguments and how to use also new arguments. We have been exploring the production of 19 training modules. We have already produced 6 of these modules with information on the health impacts of air pollution for doctors, for clinicians, for practitioners, and in general for the public health crowd. This is quite innovative. There are not many of these training modules available for just specific for air pollution. And we are trying to also to have much broader ideas on risk communication. And we have been piloting different workshops and in Ghana in the last few months. Next slide, please. So we are piloting and experiencing with different communication tools. And I have here a slide on Breathe Life campaign that I was mentioned before, where the different UN nation agencies are together, and WHO is playing, I would say, a substantial role on fostering, on connecting cities and countries, in sharing information, and also discussing solutions and possible interventions in different contexts. At the moment, the campaign has 79 cities, regions, and countries that joined until a week ago. And this means that we can reach really a big crowd, and there are thousands of people that are daily and weekly connecting to this campaign. And in the campaign, you can find also examples of the work I was mentioning in Ghana before, where we have been very supportive of community engagement. And for example, there was various discussions in different communities in Accra about the air pollution. And these are successful examples of engaging people and also building a generation that is very, very aware of the consequences of air pollution. Next slide, please. So the key messages from this very brief intervention from WHO side, from me and Caroline, is that air pollution should be really considered seriously. It's the second leading cause of non-communicable diseases. Is almost at the level of tobacco. This is something that you cannot ignore anymore. And this is really, Maria was, while answering before to the questions, our director was mentioning that is incredible. I mean, this is a fact, basically, that is ignored in many countries. And the other point that we didn't have time much to discuss is that exposure to air pollution is harmful even at low levels. So there are studies, there are cohort studies, and there are a lot of evidence now that all the experts also agree that even in countries where there are low levels of air pollution, these are harmful to their population. Caroline?
Thanks, Pam. And lastly, so monitoring air quality is fundamental for tracking progress in air pollution and protecting public health. To know where we're going, we need to know what our baseline exposure is, and we need to know how each of these interventions are effective and if they're actually working and helping us to reduce the air pollution. And the last key message is the reduction of anthropogenic sources of air pollution can be pursued through several sectoral interventions. We've seen that both from Soraya and from this slide, from this presentation too. If we want to actually reduce transboundary air pollution, we need to look at a very holistic way of identifying where the different sectors and where the air pollution is coming from, and trying to approach it in a multi-sectoral way. I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time. We look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdu, and thank you, Ms. Shersing. This is a very interesting presentation. We learned a lot about how air pollution really impacts the body, and really, and the importance of regional cooperation, the importance of monitoring, and other actions the health and other sectors that can make. I'd like, and we have more questions for them at the end. I'd like to now turn to our next panelist and final panelist, and this is Mr. Ole Nielsen, who, as mentioned before, he's worked on the Montreal Protocol. And I'd like to give you the floor. Over to you, Mr. Nielsen.
Thank you very much, Heather. Do you see my screen now?
It's coming. This says it started to share. Let's see.
Yeah, it says sharing, but I'm not
sure. There we go. Now it's there on my side. Okay.
Thank you so much, and also thank you for the introduction at the beginning of this session. I feel a bit flattered. I have to say, from the high-level segment, it was mentioned that it's important the air we breathe, and yesterday I was down with a severe cold and my voice was gone, but I hope I will manage to speak through this session today. Numbers we talked about, so I will speed up because I can also see we are late. So I will try to complement the introduction from Stefan Siekers in the very beginning of today's meeting with some pictures and maybe with a little more information, but obviously the objective of this presentation is to show how UNIDO deals with air pollution in more practical terms. It was also mentioned that we work with industry. Our objective is to ensure inclusive, sustainable industrial development to reduce poverty. So that is where we come from. You know, we are a medium-sized organization, so we cannot, despite all good intentions, resolve all the issues of the world. So we need definitely to work very closely and actually increase the cooperation with partners. This is governments, donors, of course, UN sister agencies, but also industries, academia, NGOs. So whoever is involved, because this is a huge area. We approach the air pollution with two tracks. It was mentioned in the beginning, 2 pillars, but I prefer to call it tracks because then there will be pillars under the tracks. First track is the energy itself, and the starting point is we should minimize the energy needed for any industrial process or any product. We cannot avoid energy, it's clear, and then we should seek options that utilize renewable energies rather than fossil fueled. And finally, we have to look at the transportation sector, which is a sector with a huge growth potential, and this needs to be sustainable. Am I still with you? Because I get messages on my screen. I assume I'm still with you. So obviously our objective is that we should reduce the energy consumed and produced by fossil fuels. And that will lead to the emission reductions, both as greenhouse gases, but also particulate matters, NOx, etc., and will facilitate the reduction of air pollution. We have 4 pillars in relation to the energy production and use. And the first pillar is that we focus on how can we reduce the energy consumption of the existing industries. So we call it decarbonization of existing industries. I have listed here some examples. I will not read them out all because we are late of time. The second pillar is that we need to focus on how can we develop industries with a minimum carbon footprint, and there are several ways, and I have listed the programs here. The third column is, all good intentions, they come with a cost. So we also need to see how can we facilitate the reduction in air pollution and seek proper financing. The fourth column, and I'm happy to see in the introduction behind Tareq was a poster of the Vienna Energy Forum. That's our global agenda settings where we address the issues of energy use in industries. The second track we have is how can we reduce the air pollution of chemicals that are regulated by multilateral agreements. And we talk here in particular about the POPs, about the mercury, and then of course about my baby, the ozone depleting substances, but also the alternatives to ozone depleting substances that still have impact on climate. And we do activities in all 3 fields, and of course we can prove that we have reduced emission of toxic substances or substances that impact climate. I can report that we see now a recovery of the ozone layer, which has a significant health impact. And here we have our 3 conventions: the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants, we have the Minamata Convention on mercury, and then in the end we have the Montreal Protocol and its financial mechanism, the multilateral fund. I have some examples that would illustrate, but I would just like to ask you, Heather, do we run out of time? Because they are self-explaining, or do you want me to walk quickly through them?
I would say if you could maybe you have about 2 more minutes, if you could walk through them on that, and then we can go to the discussion. Then
I can just give you the headlines because they are like 6.
Thanks.
We do activities in terms of overall health and pollution action plans. We call it HPAPs, and we do that with support from the European Commission and the Global Alliance on Health and Pollution. I'm sure that my colleagues will provide links so that you can get more material. This is in a few countries, but this is an activity we do. We're also focusing on the very simple things that was mentioned several times, the cook stoves, and we are doing a project in Tanzania where we are intending to convert 500,000 households to clean cooking fuels rather than polluting fuels. We focus on the e-mobility, given that the car industry and the transportation industry is expected to grow a lot within the next 25 years. So we are focusing on the right solutions for the transportation sector. We are doing projects in chemicals and waste management. E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream that we have in the world now, and it needs to be properly disposed of and to the extent possible also recycled. We do projects within the artisanal gold mining. That is the largest sector for emission of airborne mercury. So that's another activity of UNIDO. Finally, my baby, the Montreal Protocol. We do projects in 70 countries to eliminate the emission of ozone-depleting substance, but also greenhouse gases. And finally, a new activity with UNIDO on green hydrogen. It's only from last year, but green hydrogen can facilitate green fuels that will avoid fossil fuels. And that will bring me to my end in a very speedy manner, and my voice is still with me. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nielsen. It was really great to hear about UNIDO's work and how you're really starting to tackle on with e-mobility, clean cooking, and the green hydrogen. These are all great ways that we can all take actions to address air quality in your supporting countries. So I wanted to give it, first of all, a big thanks and round of applause to all the presentations provided by the different presenters, panelists. And now we'd like to turn and shift to actually hearing a bit more and getting a little more on the spot answers from them regarding some questions. So I'd like to now first turn back to Ms. Soraya. Soraya, if you could tell us a little bit more, what are some of the success factors for effective air pollution action? You highlighted a lot of some of the key findings in your report, but what are some specific actions you might share with the team today? Thanks. Over.
Thank you, Heather. So I think it's been actually some of these success factors were highlighted in the presentation that the three of us did. So I will maybe restate the obvious, but definitely I think one of the critical success factor is, first of all, understanding air pollution sources. So how do we measure air pollution? How do we improve air quality monitoring, assessments, source apportionment studies to really make sure we have a good understanding of where it comes from. So that's one. Secondly, I think very important to target the most emitting sectors. And again, it's for each jurisdiction to make sure that they do that and they take action on these most emitting sectors, whether it is road, transport, industrial emissions, residential energy, open burning of waste, e-waste, as we just heard now, agriculture, etc. And really combining this with regulatory framework and strong regulatory framework. As we know, there is still an issue of compliance and enforcement, and only if we have this regulatory framework for industries, for governments, for other stakeholders, we'll be able to have successes. Then two more points. It's a very, I think, air pollution is a very complex issues. It cuts across various different agendas. We spoke about, of course, climate change. We spoke about the triple planetary crisis. It also has impact on biodiversity, on nature, and so on. It also has to do with the way we actually produce and consume goods. So I think we need to recognize that as well. And regional and sub-regional cooperation efforts would be the last one for me. Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Soraya. I think the regional cooperation is key to and this idea of regulatory, because I think we've seen some very important success stories with the Montreal Protocol, for example, on how where we have these agreements that we can really make a difference. Also transboundary situations as well. We have agreements across countries. We're all working in a concerted way to really tackle air pollution and essentially make blue skies for all. I'd now like to turn and have a question for Ms. Sher Singh. Ms. Sher Singh, can you give us, we talked about, we hear from Soraya some of the important roles, different sectors, and we heard from Mr. Nielsen as well. What are the roles that the health sector can play at reducing air pollution? Over to you.
Thanks, Heather. I think just to expand upon what we talked about in our presentation, it's important for the health sector to synthesize the most recent evidence on how air pollution impacts our health. We have cohort studies that are coming out every year, multiple studies that are showing us that air pollution impacts different parts of our body at even low levels than we anticipated. So using that evidence to develop evidence-based guidelines that can help us support effective interventions that allow us to have sustainable development and green economy strategies. It's also important for us to track the progress. So the health sector helps us. We need to monitor the exposure and monitor the different health indicators that allow us to measure results and contribute to tracking the sustainable development goals that are related to air pollution and mortality attributed to air pollution. And it's also important for us for the ministries of health to convene and to advise, working with collaboration with the energy and the environment sector to effectively address public health issues. Over to you.
Great. No, thank you. I think that that's very key. And it's indeed, you know, people, the health sector, we can really use and convene those people to serve as the kind of no one's going to argue that they don't want to protect health. So we can really bring those sectors together and use health as kind of a common denominator between different sectors to take action. Now, Mr. Nielsen, could you tell us a little bit more about some of the work that UNIDO is doing and how you're to tackle air quality? You gave us a bit of a highlight, and we had to cut your presentation a bit short. Do you want to elaborate a few more on some of those actions, or one particular one? I hear the Montreal Protocol, and I understand from your background is your baby. So if you want to elaborate a little more on that one, over to you.
Yeah, I'm very happy to elaborate on Montreal Protocol because it serves a double purpose. We do, within the Montreal Protocol, eliminate the use of chemicals that are strong greenhouse gases. And just to give you an idea, they are typically 1,500 or 2,000 times CO2. And the use is tremendous. Just again, to give you an idea of the magnitude, the Montreal Protocol division at UNIDO, we eliminate something in the level of 60 to 70 million CO2 tons per year through our activities. The second issue, which is as interesting, is that we are looking at some sectors, and it was mentioned in the high-level segment, the air conditioning sector, residential air conditioning sector. That's a sector which is under transition, and UNIDO is privileged to work with the Chinese industries, and they account for 75% of the global manufacturing output. And the Chinese government are very, very ambitious. It's a slow process, but they are going for the solution with a minimum impact on environment, both in terms of emission, but also in terms of energy consumption. So that's like something that could avoid 0.2, 0.3 degrees of global warming. And you should compare that to the Paris Agreement, where we talk about 0.5. So it's like really, really significant. So I hope that was enough to share my enthusiasm about Montreal Protocol. Thank you.
No, I think that was great, and you really captured with some numbers. There's some very strong numbers in global warming potential from the protocol gases. So thank you, and important that we can mitigate those shortly. If possible, could I ask one more question to Mr. Mudu if he's still online? Mr. Pierre, are you online?
Yes.
Great. So Pierre, I wanted to ask you a question, as you've worked a lot in urban areas. And so what are some examples of solutions or interventions that could really work in urban areas to tackle air pollution, climate change, as well as protect public health, those three achievements? Over to you, if you can give us some examples.
Yeah, well, I was mentioning before the work that we have done in Accra, and it's a work that has been done in collaboration with other UN agencies also. And I mean, this is a specific example of solutions and interventions that are related to short-lived climate pollutants. And among the short-lived climate pollutants, you have black carbon. And the black carbon reduction affect climate change and reduce also emissions that are related to PM 2.5. So to particulate matter, that is our main indicator for the air quality in relation to health. So solutions and interventions that consciously are addressing, for example, short-lived climate pollutants are solutions and interventions that are to be absolutely supported. And we know that the primary sources of air pollution are related to energy production, to transport, and also to open fires, biomass burning that was mentioned before. And it's difficult to isolate, good examples because it's difficult to track how much these examples have health benefits. But I'm coming to my mind, for example, in the transport, and there's many examples where in which cities were able to change policies. And for example, big European cities, they have been enforcing speed limit of 30 kilometers per hour. And there are already analyses where there was a decrease of NO2 pollution by 15%. So there are several examples that have to be taken in mind because there is the possibility to have health benefits by addressing both climate pollutants and air pollutants.
Great, that is some significant reductions already seen, and those are simple actions that cities can take. That's great to hear. And I just wanted to really thank you all to the panelists, and I wanted to highlight that some theme that crossed all the presentations was really the fact that all of these organizations are really providing the tools and resources and information for countries to really take action. And each of these organizations are really encouraging, facilitating this regional cooperation, because air pollution is not something that can be done on an individual basis, on an individual country basis. It needs to be done. We all have a part to play, whether we're a citizen, we're a policymaker, UN organization, we all have something to do. And this is something that why Blue Sky Day happens. We want to make those kids who never seen a blue sky themselves, let's let them see that sky. I've heard stories where they were so excited just one day seeing a blue sky. Can you imagine? So that's what we're all working to do. And I really appreciate all the time and important information and interesting information shared from all the panelists. I'd like to hand back to our host now to find out part 2 of the quiz. All right. Thank you all, panelists.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, panelists. Yes, let's move on to the second part of the quiz. Can somebody give me a thumbs up when you see the screen?
Can see it, thanks.
Okay, well, this was the last question where we left off. And what I didn't actually share earlier is the leaderboard. So this is where we stand right now. And we are ready to move on to the second part. All right, for those of you who didn't do it earlier, I'm going to give a few seconds if you want to go to menti.com, and with the same code that appears on the screen, that is the same code as we used earlier, 31144817. And that is just on menti.com, and that way you can also take part on this on the quiz. And as we said earlier, there will be prizes and the winners will be announced at the end. We have already done 4 questions, and in this new section, we're going to do 6 questions. So that is 10 in total, and we value the correct answer, but we also value speed. So make sure that you take part in the quiz and hopefully win one of the prizes that we've got prepared. All right, so that is menti.com for those who are not yet with us in the quiz, and with the code that appears on the screen, 31144817. I see that there's 31 people, so I'm going to give a few more seconds before we move on to this part of the quiz. Okay, so I think we can begin.
Yes, let's start.
Okay, so this is question 5. In which regions open burning of waste is a major air pollution issue? Time's up, and 8 people out of the 20 people participating in this part of the quiz got the answer correct. It is Africa and Asia Pacific. This was mentioned by one of the panelists in this last section of the event. Let's move on to the press C to open voting. So the answer to this question was true, and almost everybody got that answer correct. So moving on to the next question, this would be question number 7. How many deaths each year are caused by air pollution? Time's up, and answer A was the correct answer for this question. It is 6.7 million. 14 people got that correct. Moving on to the next question. And the answer for this one was 79%, and 13 people got that right. So moving on to the next, I'm not sure if this is the last question or second to last question. Reducing, eliminating emissions of persistent organic pollutants, mercury emissions, and ozone depleting substances can. Good, 13 people got that correct. It is a tricky question because of the way it was formulated. True or false? E-waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world and can pollute the air. And this was the last question. Everybody got this answer correct. So moving on now to the final results. So we've got, let me see. Okay, so we have a clear winner, Miss Beatriz Perez, and she's a colleague of mine here in UNIDO, so she will receive a prize, but actually a few others will also receive a prize. I was just informed that we have 6 prizes available in the end. So anybody who is in the top 6, can you please write to us privately on the chat right here, and we will get in touch with you. If you can give us your name and your email address, and then we can get in touch with you and see how we can give you the prize. Virtual round of applause to Ms. Beatriz Perez, and I will stop sharing my screen now.
Belén, actually, we have 8 prizes. 2 will be provided by UNIDO Staff Council, and 6 will be provided by our colleagues. So okay, we have 8 prizes. So please write to us by email, and we'll make sure that you get your prize. Even if you're not living in Vienna, we can send you the prize through regular mail, probably. Thank you.
Okay, so if you're in the top 8 in the chart that is on the screen right now, if you can send us a message privately on the chat with your email address, and we will contact you about the prize. All right, so I would like to give the floor now to Mr. Alfredo Cueva. He is project manager and industrial development officer here at UNIDO for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Belen. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm very pleased as UNIDO focal point for this International Day on Blue Skies celebration to see the results of this activity. I think we have been able to really share all the information thanks to the colleagues from UNEP and also from the World Health Organization, as well as colleagues from UNIDO. We will further share all this information because the event has been recorded and will be shared with the organizers of this International Day, so everyone can have access to these presentations. And I think this will be a very useful source of information for scientists, for practitioners, for essentially everyone. Without further ado, I would like to stress my thanks to everyone who has been able to join, also to those who have acted as moderators, panelists, or even behind the scenes, and also to UNIDO, who has entrusted me the task of leading inside the house this celebration. Thank you very much. We hope to see you in a new edition of this celebration next year. Thank you. Bye-bye.